who are really, I did videos about both of those lists, and then this is my our list. Hey everyone, hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going over the best books of the 21st century according to us, according to BookTube, according to this little corner of the internet. And boy, am I excited to share this list with you. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much. If you submitted books, if you're here watching, I am just so stinking thrilled that we created a list. I feel so honored. I feel so blessed and grateful that you all were submitting books. Amazing. It was amazing. And we'll get into the details of how many people voted, how many were submitted, and then we'll go through the list. If this is your first video, then let me give you some context. So hi, I'm Shelly, and about a week and a half ago or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, the New York Times put out their their best 100 books of the 21st century according to the people that they sent ballots to. So there were 500 people that voted on that list. It was sort of like an invite-only process, and there was a lot of famous people, a lot of literary people, a lot of authors, so on and so forth. Then they did a follow-up list, and in that original article, readers of the New York Times, readers around the world, could submit 10 books that they thought were the best of the 21st century. And through all of those votes, the New York Times came up with the reader's version of this list. Meanwhile, when the first list came out, the top 100 according to literary people, I was kind of like, we could do better, y'all. We can do better. And so I created a Google form and then asked you all to submit titles that you think were the best books of the 21st century. And boy, did you all show up. So thank you again. If you're new and you're liking the vibes, even after that really long preamble, I would encourage you to subscribe, stick around. Also, just like the video. That would also really just help my channel and what I'm doing here. But regardless, what matters is that you are here, and now let's go ahead and get into the meat of this video. Let me give you a little bit of data, and then I'll talk about how I'm going to present the list, and then we'll really just dive into this list. So the data is that about 200 people voted. I am so amazed that so many of you showed up. So about 200 people submitted books. And then about 1,300, a little bit more than 1,300 books were submitted. So I transferred all of the data that was from the voting ballots into a separate document and sorted from there. And then from there, I have 76, I wish it was 75, but it ended up being 76 titles to share with you. And the way that it worked out is that I was looking for consensus. It's really hard to put under the radar books on a list like this. You are going to see more popular titles. You are going to see titles that maybe have won prizes or that are a common knowledge, common name in the household, because we are looking for books where we see people align thinking that they are the best books of the 21st century. So because we are looking for that consensus, there aren't very many, if any, truly under the radar books. I might do a follow-up video of some of the most interesting submissions I got. Just really totally off the wall to me, books I've never heard of that were fascinating. But this mostly is a list of a list of books that people agree on. And so I was going to be books I was going to do anyways, we're not going to get into what I was going to do, but just know that it had to have consensus, which means that it had to have been read by several people, and several people had to agree that it was a great book. So that's kind of the deal. I have 76 titles, and we're going to start with the lowest tier and then work our way up to the final book. So what do I mean by the lowest tier. So if I compiled a list of all the books that had 2 votes in common, the list would have been way over 100. Actually, if I compiled a list of books that had 3 votes in common, then I would have way over 100 books. So I started with books that had 4 people that submitted that this book was amazing. All right, so we're starting with this bottom tier. These books all got 4 votes each. I organized them alphabetically according to the last name of the author, and there are 25 books to tell you about. So at number 75, An Unnecessary Woman by Rabih Alameddine, first published in 2014. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I love this book. What is it about? It is about an elderly woman living in Beirut who has this fascinating hobby of translating classic works into Arabic. It is about her life, and it's about her love for literature as a woman living in Beirut, and it's about friendships. And I was just so surprised at how effective this novel was, just how good it was. It was such a good book. And I have a profound passion for it. Again, for me, one of the best books of all time. I love this book. Next up at number 75 is House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielewski, first published in 2000. This is an experimental novel about a family and their house, and it's going to be one of those books that has all of words scattered all over the page. It's going to be like very experimental in terms of formatting for a book. People who love this book tend to love this book. Next up at number 74, we have Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, first published in 2021. This is going to be following 3 separate storylines that take place, one like in the way past and one in the future. And it's going to combine these storylines in order to tell a story about human endurance. It's one that, since these lists have come out and I've seen what fans there are of Doerr, it makes me want to read this book and his other Pulitzer Prize winning novel. Then at number 73, we have Girl, Woman, Other by Bernadine Evaristo, first published in 2018. This is interconnected stories about 12 women, mostly Black women with British heritage. We're going to be thinking about femininity, race, and identity, especially as someone who is a British Black woman. It's supposed to be really good and really effective. Number 72, a book that actually showed up on the other lists, the previous lists that I mentioned, and it is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is going to be about I was about to put up 2 fingers, but 3 friends at a boarding school. It's a mysterious boarding school that has a very particular purpose for these children. It's eerie and probably the quietest dystopian one would ever read. My computer's right here for reference, just so you know. So number 71 is Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Toshikazu Kawagachi, translated by Jeffrey Trousselet. And this is going to be about a small cafe in Tokyo that is supposed to allow its customers to time travel. It's going to be exploring the themes of regret and second chances. Number 70 is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is going to be a nature writing book. It's an homage to nature, but it uses both indigenous wisdom and scientific knowledge and Kimmerer's personal narrative to create this beautiful book. I've heard that it is stunningly rendered. Then at number 69 is The Devil in the White City by Erik Larson. This is a nonfiction book about the architect of the Chicago World Fair back in, I think it's 1893. And then also H.H. Holmes, who was the first serial killer in the US, so they think. And the way that Holmes preyed on visitors at the fair. Then we have at 68, Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. This is about a Korean family who immigrates to Japan, and I think it follows about 100 years of this family. It follows it's a multi-generational family saga, so it follows definitely several generations. I have read this. It's not my favorite, but it does talk about the immigrant experience, especially through that living in Japan, who have immigrated to Japan, which, you know, the Koreans and the Japanese, they have their own relationship. And in that way, the book was really interesting. It really added a level of interest for me, even if overall the book didn't work. But obviously it makes this list, so a lot of people love this book. Number 67 is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is a book, this is her memoir. She is in a same-sex relationship that is abusive, and she uses different styles, like different writing styles, to convey different parts of her life. And again, people who love this book really seem to love this book. Number 66 is Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. This is about a woman who is struggling with some mental illness, and it's about the struggle between her internal battles while trying to balance like family life and family dynamics and so on. Then at number 65 is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This is a post-apocalyptic, eerie, dystopian-esque type book. Actually, it's more post-apocalyptic than it is dystopian, about a father and son who are trying to navigate this very changed world. Number 64 is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This is Trevor Noah's memoir. It is amazing, by the way. I love it. It's so funny. It is so funny. I just have a newfound respect for Trevor Noah, who is like a nighttime TV host, TV show host. I don't know anything about pop culture, so please don't come for me. But Trevor Noah, he is a celebrity of sorts, and he wrote this memoir. But this memoir is about him growing up in South Africa and what it is like growing up as a kid who is mixed. He has a black mother and a white father, and in South Africa that means something very specific, and it is funny, it's educational. It was so good, and I'm so glad to see it on this list because, oh my goodness, I love this book so much. Number 63 is There by Tommy Orange. This is going to be about Native Americans living in Oakland, California. They actually come together and they explore the effects of colonization, and they think about community and identity while they are gathered together. I heard it's a powerful book. A name that I don't think showed up on either of the previous lists, so I'm glad that our list has her. And at number 62, it is A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. This was first published in 2013. This is going to be a novel that alternates between two voices, one of which is the diary of a young Japanese girl, and the other is about a writer named Ruth living in remote Canada. I don't know how she pulls the story together, but obviously if it made the list, she does it really well. Number 61 is Gilead by Marilyn Robinson, one of the most beautifully rendered books, and so quiet. I cannot emphasize enough the the quietness of this novel. I would say that people who like Mary Oliver's poetry will also really love Gilead because they are written in the same vein. Okay, so what this is about is that it's about an aging preacher who is writing a letter to his son, trying to think about what kind of things do I want to leave for my son to read later on in life. What do I want to tell him? What do I want to tell him about life and about living life? And what do I want to tell him about our family and the way our family functions, and so on and so forth. And it's so thoughtful and meditative. It's a feat. It's an absolute feat. Number 60 is Normal People by Sally Rooney. This is going to be about the on-again, off-again relationship of Connell and Marianne. And they're in that transition period from high school to college, and it tracks that really tumultuous time while their relationship is both on again and off again. I've read this book. I'm not a super fan of it, but I know people who, again, love Sally Rooney. They love her with all their hearts. Number 59 is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is about a young woman who was abused by her older professor, her high school professor, her English teacher. It should not be professor, English teacher. And later on in this character's life, allegations of him being inappropriate and having very inappropriate relationships with his students, these allegations come out, and it makes Vanessa, our main character of this fictional book, it allows her to think back on the relationship that she had with him back when she was 15. It's supposed to be a really like an eerily rendered book. Number 58 is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in the Stormlight archive. I'm glad to see Sanderson on here, even if I don't read him. and I've tried, y'all. I've tried. But I'm just glad to see him on here because I feel like he really does represent like the fantasy writer of the 21st century. He just churns them out, man. Like people just love his stuff, and he writes, like, his work ethic is incredible. Number 57 is Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. This is translated by Blake Ferris and Matthias Ripa. This is a graphic memoir, a graphic novel memoir. It's not graphic as in like it shows a bunch of stuff. It's a graphic novel formatted memoir. Y'all get it, I know. Okay, and it's going to be talking about Satrapi's childhood in Iran during the Islamic Revolution. I have this on my shelves unread. It really needs to be read by me soon. Number 56 is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This is about the main character, Addie LaRue, makes a Faustian deal, a deal with the devil. I haven't read Faust yet. I need to rectify that. And I haven't read this. And the bargain is that she will live forever, but everyone she meets forgets her. And so we follow her through the centuries, living with the consequences of this deal. Number 55 is The Immoral Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This was first published in 2010. This is a narrative nonfiction in which Skloot uncovers or tells the story of Henrietta Lacks, whose cells were taken without her consent back in 1951, and they were used for pivotal research later on. It's going to be talking about the ethics of the research community. Number 54 is Rules of Civility by Amor Towles. This is going to be a historical fiction book set in New York City in the 1930s, and we are following a character named Katie who is navigating the social and economic changes of the time. Number 53 is Cutting for Stone by Abraham Verghese. This is a coming-of-age novel following twin boys. They were conjoined at birth and then they were separated, and it is about them growing up in Ethiopia. And it has some of the most incredible medical writing. It was so like gritty but perfect. I love that kind of stuff, and this is some of the best that I've read. And then at number 52 is The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. We're following two young men, well, they're boys, older teenage boys I think at the time, and they get sent to a reform school. It is about the abuse that they endured, but it's also about their friendship, which at the heart of it was fantastic. Their friendship was, it was so good. This book scared the wits out of me, and ultimately I realized that Whitehead, as much as I can absolutely admire and appreciate what he's doing on the page, it's just too intense for me. We've made it to the next tier. Yay! All of these books, the next 17, got 5 votes each, which is a feat with all of the data that I had to wade through. That is quite a bit. And yeah, we're starting again. We're going to do alphabetically according to the last name of the author. So we have Tender as the Flesh by Augstina Bazterrica, translated by Sarah Moses. This is a dystopian book in which animals were infected and now we have started to eat people. And if you can imagine, we are thinking about dehumanization and societal collapse. Then at number 50, we go from like dystopian world to something totally the opposite, and it is The Heart's Invisible Furies by John Boyne, first published in 2017. This is going to span 7 decades. We're following an adopted gay man in Ireland, and he's going to be exploring life, family, and the socio-political changes that he had to live through. Then at number 49, oh my gosh, I've been like going through these, but sometimes a book surprises me, even though I put this list together, okay? I love this book. I read it this year, and it is The Last Samurai by Helen DeWitt, first published in 2000. This is going to be about a child, a prodigy, brilliant child named Ludo, and his mom, Sibylla, who is a struggling mom, and she thinks that there's nothing worse than boredom. So you can imagine all the work that she puts into keeping her brilliant child entertained, even as a struggling single mom. It is fantastic. It is really an interesting and smart book. I had a great time reading it when I did. Number 48 is Duck's Newburyport by Lucy Ellmann. This is a stream of consciousness style book. We are supposed to be in the mind of a very anxious female narrator, and I've heard that like 2/3 of the way through the book, the floor drops out from under the narrative, and it like is incredibly shocking. I've heard it's a weird book, but so worth the page count. It's almost 1,000 pages. It's definitely over 800, but under 1,000. So somewhere in that vein, a long book, but from what I've heard from people, well worth the time. Then at number 47 is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This took the world by storm. It is a psychological thriller, and we are thinking about mostly male-female relationships, or the relationships between husbands and wives. It's supposed to have a fantastic twist. I have yet to read it, but I have it on my shelves unread. Then at number 46, a book I have read, Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. I like this book. I like Say Nothing Better by him, in which he explores the history of the Troubles in Ireland, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Empire of Pain, and we're thinking of the Sackler family, who really contributed to the opioid epidemic here in the US, and he tracks that story. It's an enraging book, an absolutely infuriating book. Now another book, Babel. I don't know. 45 is Babel by R.F. Kuang. It's an epic fantasy story, and we're thinking about the themes of power, morality, and the consequences of actions. Number 44, a book that didn't show up on the Times' list, but is on our list, which I'm really happy about. It made such a huge splash, and I'm surprised that the Times kind of ignored it. They were probably just going through the data like I was. But anyways, it's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo by Stieg Larsson, translated by Reg Keeland. This is going to be pairing up Mikael Blomkvist, who is a reporter and an investigative journalist, and he is going to pair up with Lisbeth Salander, it's Salander, yeah, with a D, not a G. And she is somebody who's fantastic with computers. She's young and she plays by her own rules. Very different than Blomkvist, but their pairing is absolutely perfect. These are thriller-esque mystery novels and definitely fantastic. I've read this and I've read the first 3. They're really, really, really good. The next at number 43, another book I have read, is Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, translated by Jenny Tapley Takamori. This follows a woman who is somebody who moves through the world very differently than other people. I think that she is not neurotypical, and she is really comforted by her routine as somebody who works at the convenience store, but it is the pressure of others that want her to change her life. And so she kind of takes that advice, and you see where that goes. And it's a quirky little, slim little thing, and it's worth it. It's just kind of like a perfect little novella that works really well, and so I'm glad to see it on the list. Another book at number 42 that I have read, actually just finished, Tom Lake by Ann Patchett. This is going to be about a woman who has adult daughters in their 20s, and they, during the long days of the pandemic, they start asking their mom about this man that she used to date, who's now famous. He's now a famous actor, and they're like, hey, you remember that time that you dated him? Can we actually hear the full story? And so over the course of several days, she tells them the full story, and it is so good. It's exactly what Ann Patchett does best, in that she creates really believable, nuanced family relationships, which is just fantastic. And then, of course, the list would not be complete without Harry Potter. So at number 41, we have Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. This is Rowling's book that came out in 2000. It's part of the Harry Potter series, and it is the 4th book in the series, and we're with the Twizzard Tournament. And just, oh my gosh, when I was but a girl, a sweet young thing. But no, I was a young girl reading these books, and I love them. I loved the length. I loved everything that was happening. I felt like I was being swept away in a magical world. And I think that in a lot of ways, I am grateful to Rowling for what she did for my reading life back then to create the reader that I am now. But I just have to smile while I see this book on the list. Not one that I submitted, but one that, I think just has a fondness for in a lot of people's reading memories. Number 40 is The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield, first published in 2006. This is going to be about a biographer who is tasked to write the biography of a reclusive novelist. And it's supposed to be fantastic and have really good gothic vibes. One that I have become more interested in because of these lists that I've put together. Number 39 is another translated work, and it is Minor Detail by Adania Shibali, translated by Elizabeth Jacquet. This is going to be it's going to be a parallel narrative, one of which is about a young woman who was brutally assaulted in Palestine in 1949, and the other storyline is about a contemporary woman investigating this assault that happened to this woman 50 years before. Number 38 is White Teeth by Zadie Smith. This has been on all three lists. It makes me want to read it even more. This is going to be set in London, and we're following two families. One of them is a Bangladeshi Muslim family, and the other one is a British Jamaican family as they navigate cultural clashes, generational conflicts, and identity issues spanning generations, which is a better description, I might say, than me just constantly saying a maximalist work, which it is, though. It is a maximalist work. Number 37 is Olive Kittredge by Elizabeth Strout. It won the Pulitzer, and it is about a curmudgeon, cranky old woman, okay? And each story is, it's almost like a book of short stories, but all centering around this main character. I have it on my shelves unread. I really need to read it now that I think it's popped up on all three lists, which is such a feat. Number 35 is Shuggie Bain by Douglas Stewart. This won the Booker back in 2020. It's about a family. This is set in the 1980s in Glasgow. We're thinking about this family who has this really dysfunctional mother figure. She is an addict, and this family is impoverished, and we're thinking about the bonds of family amid these struggles. And actually, it's similar to the element of struggle and family bonds and motherhood is similar to the next book, which is number 35, and it's On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. And in this book, the main character, the narrator, is writing letters to his mother who is illiterate, and he's trying to express to his mom who he is, knowing full well that she can't read those letters. And he's talking about, he wants to, tell her that he is a gay man, and he's trying to express to her some about his identity and who he is. And we're going to be, again, thinking about that relationship between a mother and her child. Now we're at the next section. These got 6 votes each. Again, a total feat. And again, we're going alphabetically according to the last name of the author. So A Man Called Uwe comes in at number 34 by Fredrik Backman, translated by Henning Koch. This is about an old man named Uwe, if you can imagine. And he is sad and curmudgeoned and not doing well in his life. And this story has a good dose of humor amid darker themes, and it also has a found family element. Oh my goodness, words are leaving me, which is not great. Okay, so now we're at 33. It is The Luminaries by Eleanor Catton, which I was so glad to see on this list because I don't think it showed up on the previous 2. We are in 1866 in New Zealand. It's the gold rush, and it starts off with a murder mystery, and it starts off as a whodunit, but it ends up both plotting wise and narrative structure. It is a feat. It is fantastic. The way that she structures this story, the way that she tells the story of this murder mystery is incredible, and it deserves all of the praise that it has gotten. Next up is number 32, Mr. Jonathan Strange, right? Number 32, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke, first published in 2004. This is an alternative historical fiction novel set in England during the Napoleonic Wars, and we're thinking about what if magic is really real? And we're thinking there's a little bit of this clash between like the academic and then the practical. So we have all these academics that are interested in magic because in this time, in this alternative history, magic is real. So they're thinking about it in this sort of like, with a monocle, like, wonder what magic is all about, and thinking about like the theory of magic. And then there is actual magic happening. And it's a little bit of like the clash, but also just uncovering this really incredible world that Susanna Clarke is able to build. It's an absolute feat. I watched the show. My husband read the book and watched the show. He really liked it. And it's a long thing, but really, really good. And I'm so glad that it showed up on our list. Number 31 is James by Percival Everett. This is a satirical novel. It's a reimagining of Huckleberry Finn, but instead told through the voice of James, who is Jim in Huckleberry Finn, Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn. But now, instead of Jim, he's a fully realized character, James, and it is super smart and it reads like a thriller. It's really, really good. Then at number 30, we have Atonement by Ian McEwan. Talk about a book that I really didn't think about 3 weeks ago and now has shot up to the top of my TBR. Like, if I could start reading it tomorrow, which I don't have time in my schedule right now, I might well do that. This was first published in 2001. It is set before, during, and after World War II, according to my notes. And it is the repercussions of a young girl's false accusations about her sister's lover. We're going to be thinking about the power of storytelling, but also about issues between the different classes in England during the time, like both before, during, and after World War II. Then at number 29, we have Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is the memoir. It's a memoir about Chanel Miller, who was known as Emily Doe during the Stanford sexual assault incident that happened on a collegiate campus here in the US. And for a long time, her identity was hidden. And then she comes out with this memoir talking about her experience being this anonymous figure on the biggest court case during that time, when it was going on. Like, everybody was talking about this court case, and yet her identity was anonymous. It's really interesting getting her side of the story. Super emotional, super effective at what it was doing. I really liked it when I read it at the time. Number 28 is Circe by Madeline Miller. This is a retelling of a Greek myth, Circe. She's a Greek goddess, a sorcerer. This is like the beginning of this is the beginning of what I can remember as feminist retellings in the 21st century. It definitely goes to Madeline Miller, and Circe was supposedly beautifully rendered. I have it on my shelves unread. It really needs to be rectified. I really need to get to it, but beautifully rendered, and really started this movement of like super feminist retellings of ancient stories. Number 27 is Where the Crawdad Sings by Delia Owens. This is a coming-of-age murder mystery novel about a young girl growing up in a marsh on the coast of North Carolina. I really loved Owens's nature writing. I thought that was beautifully rendered, even if I didn't really love the main plot of the story. And then at number 26, we have The Dutch House by Ann Patchett, which is about siblings Danny and Maeve and their connection with place, which is this Dutch house. I love this novel. It is so good. If you can get it on audiobook where Tom Hanks is reading it to you, my goodness, you will love it. Especially if you are a hardcore Tom Hanks fan like I am, but mostly it is a story of a sibling bond, and it is really beautifully rendered. Number 25 is Educated by Tara Westover. This is her memoir of a childhood that is cuckoo's bananas crazy, off the rails, because she grew up off the grid with pretty crunchy granola, like off the grid kind of parents, like we can't trust the government kind of parents, but also have just other interesting things going on. And it's about really overcoming those circumstances. And as you can imagine, education has a huge part in that. Number 24 is another translated novel that didn't show up on either of the lists. And it is The Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafran, translated by Lucia Graves. This is going to be set in 1945 Barcelona. It is about an antiquarian book dealer's son, and it's about a book, and I think we're moving in time. There's some magical realism elements, and it sounds so good. I actually just bought it recently, so I hope to get to it pretty soon. We've made it to the next tier, so the next 7 books got 7 votes, and we're starting with book number 23, and it is Beartown by Fredrik Backman. This was translated by Neil Smith, and this is about a small Swedish town that ends up becoming divided over an act of violence that happened. And it's supposed to be thinking on sports, like the way that sports impacts a community and culture. And I think hockey plays a huge role in this book. Next up, number 22, another book I have read, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. This is a dystopian, definitely a dystopian young adult novel in which young people become a source of entertainment when they are left out in a competition among other young people to kill one another in order to be like the last person standing. So it's thinking about thinking about themes of survival, politics, friendship, what we do for entertainment. And it made a huge splash back in the day. Number 21, another translated novel, and it is My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, translated by Anne Goldstein. This is the first in the Neapolitan novels in which we are following the friendship of Elena and Lila. And this is going to be set in Naples, so a super tiny town, and we're thinking about their friendship amid so much struggle. It is a really fascinating book, and I think it's like the people who love it tend to really like it, and the people who don't like it will say like, I don't get what the big deal is. That's the divide. I'm one of those people that really loved it. Number 20 is Small Things Like These by Clarke Keegan. This is set in 1980s Ireland. We're following a main character who is facing a moral dilemma when his principles are being challenged, which I think, it is an interesting premise. It's supposed to be a very heartwarming story, a small little thing, more of a novella than anything else, and full of compassion. Next, at number 19, we have 11/22/63. This is about a high school teacher, and he finds a portal to go back in time. And what happens when you change time? It's kind of like the butterfly effect. One small thing, it changes the whole course of history. And I think, as one could imagine, or as I would imagine, because I've never read it, that he goes back to 11/22/63. Did I say it was by Stephen King? Yes, this is by Stephen King. Number 18 is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. We are set in a post-apocalyptic world, and we're following a small group. It's a flu pandemic, so even though this came out in 2015, she somehow could see the future, Mandel did, and we're following a troupe of actors and musicians as they are trying to navigate this really dangerous and uncertain future. Number 17 is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is a science fiction novel. The main character wakes up alone on a spaceship with no memory of who he is or what he is doing there, and he is racing against time to save humanity from extinction. I can see why people like it because the premise sounds absolutely exciting. We've gotten to the next level with 8 votes, and we only have 5 titles. So we're really getting to like the top tier of what people loved, okay? So with 8 votes, and again, still going in alphabetical order. All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. This is set in World War II. We're following a blind French girl and a German boy who crosses paths, and they have to navigate the war and all that is happening. It sounds amazing. Talk about a book that now I really want to read, considering how many people absolutely adore this. This won the Pulitzer back in the day, and I think that that's why maybe so many people picked it up. But see, I don't know why I'm saying that. One of my students was reading this book, and this book was published in 2014. She was probably born in 2014, if I'm being real with y'all, and she was reading this book. She was probably born a couple of years before 2014, and she was reading this book. So the impact of this book and it being read so widely is just phenomenal. So, I mean, I think the Pulitzer really helped it stick in people's memory, but clearly people are still reading and loving it today. Then at number 15, we have Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. This is going to be about two half-sisters born in the 18th century in Ghana. One sister is sold into slavery and the other is married to a British slaver, and we're going to be following the paths through generations of what happened to these sisters who ultimately started off in the same spot and had this splitting moment, this moment in which their timelines basically split. And we see the effects of that initial decision, and we follow that decision, or that, I don't know, that pivotal moment through the generations. It's supposed to be fantastic. Then we have another World War II book, and it is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. If you talk to Kristen Hanna fans, they say this is her best book. She maybe the woman is getting some rivalry right now, but that is so brand new. That's Kristen Hanna's brand new book. We're mostly thinking this is the book that's like stood the test of time, the last 10 years at least, because it was published in 2015. And this is going to be about Nazi-occupied France, following two sisters who take different paths in resisting the German occupation. We're going to be following sisterhood bonds. Then number 13, The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This is the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy, in which just things are very, very different. It is a high fantasy novel. We are thinking about people with the power to control earthquakes who are both feared and exploited. We're thinking about themes of oppression, survival, and identity. And then, not surprisingly, the last in this tier is going to be number 12, book number 12, as we're counting down, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is going to be it's a retelling of the Iliad. And we're thinking about the friendship and relationship between Achilles and Patroclus. I read the Iliad a few years back. I love that book, and I think that I would really, really love this book, this retelling. It's supposed to be emotional, thinking about love and friendship and honor and the cost of war. Only one book got 9 votes. And so this will take us into the top 10, because this is the 11th book. So transition us into top 10. But this is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, in which we're following a 16th century family, mostly Shakespeare's family, even though Shakespeare is never named. And we're going to be following them. It's a book that touches on themes of grief and motherhood and the power of art and love. Top 10, woot woot. Okay, what's funny is that top 10 also starts with 10 votes. So 2 books got 10 votes. The first is The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, which is about Theo, who lives through a traumatic incident in his life, and he grapples with that incident, the impact of that incident. It really kind of throws his character, like the character of his human person, the morality of his human being, into sharp focus. And we're following his morality as it hangs in the balance. It's also a lot about, it touches on art, as you would imagine, because there's this famous painting of the goldfinch on the cover of a book called The Goldfinch. And I just loved the way that Tartt wrote about art. I thought it was so, so good. And then the other book that made it with 10 votes is Lincoln in the Bardo. I'm so shocked that so many people love this book. I had a lot of comments of people saying that it takes a little while to get into, but once you get into it, it's really fantastic. I had some people say they started it and didn't like it. I had a lot of feedback about this, but this is by George Saunders. It's set in 1862, and we're following Abraham Lincoln and his grief over his son, Willie. It's supposed to be a little bit interesting, a little bit of a ghost story. Again, I think it's experimental, but one that once you get through the initial weirdness and can start to click with the book, it really clicked with readers. I have this on my shelves unread. There are 3 books that got 11 votes. The first one was Foster by Clarke Keegan. I've read this. This is about a young girl who it's a short little book. It's really more of a novella than anything. It's about a young girl, and she is being literally fostered by 2 people because her family is going through a little bit of some chaotic struggle transition at the moment. And so she really experiences the love and safety and comfort of what it's like to live with these people who give that to her. And you find out why that is so important to her as the novel progresses and as the story progresses, and why them sharing their lives with this young girl is also so impactful for them. It's a really touching book, and I really liked it. I read this a while back, well over a year ago, and it's one that I do think about, and I think about fondly. Then at number 7 is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Everyone and their mother and their cousins, everybody's read this. Demon Copperhead, it is a play on Charles Dickens's David Copperfield. It's about a kid growing up in a really poor town in the Appalachians? Anyways, in an Appalachian community. There we go with my notes. He is just one of those kids that is living against the odds. All the odds are against him. That poor kid, really. And then somehow you just find yourself falling in love with Demon. I ended up really loving Demon. It's one of those books I've heard from feedback from others that if you can't get along with Demon, you won't get along with the book. I liked Demon. I found myself rooting for him. So thus, I really got along with the book, and I really enjoyed her writing. Then the last book with 11 votes is going to be The Book Thief by Markus Zusak. In this novel, so I found out recently from a comment that this book wasn't originally supposed to be for young adults, but in the US market, it was turned into a young adult book and marketed for young adults, and adults ended up really loving this book, and then everyone read it. Everyone and their mother read it. And it's about a young girl who finds some solace in stealing books and sharing them with others. Set during World War II, there's a lot of traumatic incidents that go on. There is a lot of death that happens, and that is being explored about the themes of loss and grief, but also it has this powerful I don't want to say message because it's not a message heavy book, but this powerful theme of the healing power of literature in our lives. And I really loved it. I really love that our main character, Lisa, is a reader and that she's super interested in books. It was so good, but that's really the tip of the iceberg of the fantastic piece of art that this book is. It is really, really good. Now we're at the 2 books that got 12 votes each. So the first being The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. This is about 2 young boys growing up in Kabul, one of which is, they come from 2 different castes, and at the beginning of the story, it's really just about their friendship, and then there is an inciting incident that really shapes both of their lives. I like this book. Didn't love it, but I liked it. And I can see why so many people did like it, because it is one of those super emotionally, it's got a lot of emotional turmoil in it. And it's, the setting is really interesting. Their friendship, the conversation about class, and the way that a caste system can shape our lives. All of that is really fascinating. Even though it didn't fully work for me. The other book that got 12 votes is A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles. I cannot believe so many people love this book. I'm shocked by it. So we are in 1922 Moscow. We are following Count Alexander Rostov, who is sentenced to house arrest in a hotel for writing a revolutionary poem. He wrote a revolutionary poem, and now he's in house arrest. We're thinking about his life within this hotel and the changing world outside of it. It must be something special, because that premise it's not doing much for anybody. Like, I mean, so people must be going in with really low expectations and then their mind is being blown because all of that just sounds like, okay, right, sure, sounds fine, I guess. But now I want to read it to see what all the magic that this book supposedly contains. Okay, now we're at the top 3. So 2 books got 14 votes each. The first one is Piranesi by Suzanna Clarke. In this, we follow, this book is really a beautiful homage to setting because we're following this character who is in this really incredible house that seems otherworldly, and this is a fantasy novel, and sort of slowly as he is putting the pieces together, we are also putting the pieces together, and we start to understand what this is all about, like where he's at and what's happening. And it's one of those books that just is so perfectly done. It's the opposite length of her previous novel, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Piranesi is this slim little work, and it packs a punch. It is so good. And just really readable. Interestingly though, some people will read the first page and say, I'm out, it's not for me, which is so funny. But I think this, with that same passion, the people who read it and love it, like they read this book and they love this book. And I really, really enjoyed it. The number 2 book, which tied with 14 votes, is A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. This is following 4 friends, and slowly the camera starts to focus on one singular friend, Jude. And from there, we get Jude's his background, his life, what he's been through, and why he is the way that he is. It is harrowing and dark and traumatic. And when I think about it, my heart's still kind of like, it tugs, this book still tugs at my heartstrings, even though I read it after, like, I read it right after I had my second son, and I was in between graduate semesters. I had like 3 weeks in between graduate semesters. I had my son, and in those 3 weeks, I read A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara, and I was sucked into its pages. It gave me this just incredible experience, and every day my husband would come home and I would be crying, sobbing over Jude's life. Yeah, it made a huge impact on me, and I just loved it. And then our number 1 book with 19 votes. It's our number 1 by kind of a long stretch, and it is Wolf Hall by Hilary Mantel. I love this book. This is about Thomas Cromwell, who comes from absolutely nothing. He rises to power in King Henry VIII's court, and it is full of political intrigue and gorgeous writing. I love this book, and I'm so pleased that it is number 1. I think that Mantel's writing is second to none in the 21st century, in my honest opinion. Really, really good. Yeah, anyhow, so that's it. Wow, we did it. Yay. I am hoping to make a follow-up video, maybe, about, I have all this data, right? I have all this data from you all of books that were submitted, and there were some really, 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 really interesting titles, translated works, under the radar books that I have never heard of, that like 2 or 3 people said were amazing but didn't quite get the 4 votes to make it into this list. And I wanted to share some of those titles with you. Some nonfiction, some books I've literally never heard of, and then here I am typing in a book, and then what do you know, like a few submissions or even like 150 submissions later, the book shows up again, and I'm like, what? What in the world? What is this book all about? And I think that some of the most interesting submissions lie in those in the books that only got 2 voices saying that they were the best. And so I would love to come up with just a list that really kind of maybe like interested me, that got me thinking, that got me Googling more about the book, more about the author. Yeah, I would love to share that with you because I think that stuff is kind of fascinating. So maybe it'll be like our honorable mentions, and I'll just kind of pare it down to some translated books, some nonfiction books, some fiction books that a handful of people said were really good and that I personally had never heard of, or I didn't realize that it was so fondly thought of by a handful of people. Let me know if you're interested in that. Let me know how many you've read. I had such a blast. Oh my gosh, like, you don't want to know how long it took me, y'all, to put together this list. Lots and lots of time, but that's okay. That's okay, because I had such a wonderful time doing it. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your submissions. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye!